Women hate your weakness. Now, how can we as men effectively express vulnerability in a way where it doesn't hurt our status in her eyes? Because remember, whatever decreases our own status in her eyes is gonna eventually lead to her losing respect for us. Now, it is important to understand that we as men have both masculine and feminine energy inside of us. There's a lot of people these days who pretend that as a man, you gotta be this full-time tough guy all the time. And there's this beautiful quote, I don't know who said it because I would love to give credit, but it goes something along the lines of this. If you pretend to be a full-time tough guy, you're a part-time liar. And that is true, because as much as you lack a degree of masculinity in your expression around women, and that manifests itself in very technical ways oftentimes, it is also important to keep in mind that you have to embody the feminine energy inside of you as well. If you're just masculine all the time, you're gonna miss out on the piece that's eventually gonna build connection. Because remember, in this whole dating and relationship thing, there's only two things that you have to build over the course of an interaction. One is value, in other words, status, and the other one is connection. These are the two things you always have to build over the course of an interaction. And value or status is oftentimes built through the masculine side, and the connection piece, the trust, the comfort, in other words, comes through feminine energy. Now, more often than not, you're doing very well on the connection, trust, and comfort side of things. You already got that. You're already doing really, really well on that because women friend zone you. Women do feel comfortable around you oftentimes, don't you? They can really see things going forward in terms of a friendship, but not in terms of a relationship. So what you're missing is the masculine side. But that's something that I talk about in a lot of videos. Today I want to touch on vulnerability and how you can include vulnerability in your communication with women in an effective way where it doesn't hurt your status, where it doesn't hurt your perceived value. And it's never about real value, it's always about perceived value. But it's important that you express yourself authentically, genuinely, in a way where it's effective. And I'll give you a couple of examples. A year and a half ago at Christmas, my friends and I, we went to the south side of Dublin, and there's a place called Dalkey. And usually we go there for a swim and there's no problem. We do ice baths in the winter. It's not proper ice baths, but it's very close to 0 degrees. But that day, for some reason, the waves were extraordinarily high. They were really high. If we have a video of that, we can maybe put that in here right now so you can see how crazy it was. So we obviously realized that it would be lethal to go in there, be suicide mission, so we didn't do it. So what we did instead is we took off all our clothes and we were holding on to the railing, so to speak, or to the whatever you want to call it, and the waves kept smashing against us, and it was fun and it was exciting and it was okay. So then we decided to wrap it up. We're like, that's cool. Then I had the stupid idea to say, let's go one more time. Let's do one more time, a little bit more, because I felt like, because we couldn't go in. So we didn't get that much cold exposure, and I wanted all the dopamine. I didn't just want a little bit of dopamine, I wanted all the dopamine. So we go there again, we all hold on, and all of the sudden, a of a wave hits us. Came out of nowhere, way higher than the rest. And if we find the video, you'll see it. If not, I'll describe it to you. There's rocks everywhere in an area that's usually not covered with water. Usually we would go in a lot further into the sea. But that wave just hit us so hard, we were all gone. And we were holding on for dear life to the thing. Not a hope. My knee got busted and I woke up from this darkness of water 2.5 seconds later, and I couldn't see my friends. Like, they were gone for like a solid 2 to 3 seconds. I was looking around, I saw a couple of them, and I was basically crawling, trying to get away from the water. I thought my knee was broken, so much pain. It wasn't, it just smashed against the rock so hard. Luckily, all of us survived. We didn't get sucked in. It would have been, we must have had, my mother would always say, we had our guardian angels with us. We had our guardian angels with us. And that must have really been the case. Even when I'm talking about it, I'm just, whew, there's a degree of nervousness that comes back, probably a little bit of PTSD from that day. Because if one person would have gotten sucked into the water, it would have been certain death. Because the waves would have smashed you against the rocks, you hit your head, and you're gone. We were actually this close to dying. And that happened on Christmas. And so on the drive home, the girls they were standing up, 3 girls, girlfriends, and Fernanda. They were all standing a little bit higher and they were watching the spectacle. And they saw all of us disappearing in the wave. So on the way back in the car, I was sitting there in utter shock because only half an hour to an hour later, I realized that we could have actually died there that day. So I'm sitting there in the car and I'm driving like, wow, we could have actually died. That's crazy. And I was expressing the emotions that I was feeling because I genuinely felt shock. There was genuinely a lingering degree of fear for an hour to an hour and a half afterwards because of so much cortisol and adrenaline and because of the realization that we avoided death by this much. And the way I shared it wasn't in a sad way. I didn't share it in a weak way. I shared it in a genuine way. I expressed the shock and the negativity that I was feeling. But I didn't ask her to solve a problem for me. I didn't want a shoulder to cry on. I simply expressed it in a genuine way. Because if you're a man, you can absolutely express negative emotions you feel and get comfort from her in communication. As long as you don't ask for solutions and as long as you don't present it in a way where you make yourself seem like a victim. I know this may seem like a silly little example for vulnerability, but it is an example. It's a way in which you can tell a story and be vulnerable. It's not so much you sharing what happened to you, but the energy you bring it with. It's absolutely key. Because as men, we've all gone through hard things. You've experienced difficult things in your life. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to make the date or the first month or 2 of dating into a psychotherapy session. That's very important to keep in mind. You don't want to burden her with negativity. You can share things that are maybe a rather difficult time from your past, as long as the energy you share it with isn't negative. That's very important. You can talk about it in a way where it's fun and entertaining and also where you lean into it. So you, let's say there's quite a bit of heaviness left. I mean, if there's too much left, then you should actually just do some psychotherapy. You should do some meditation. You should do some EMDR therapy. Look up EMDR therapy right now. If you happen to be struggling with anxiety, for example, it's a beautiful tool. EMDR therapy helps with PTSD, for example. It's a fantastic tool. So you should release as much of that as possible. But if there's a little bit left, even me, when I was telling the story, I felt a little bit of that anxiety and fear coming back up. Okay, maybe I need to do some more releasing, maybe a little bit more meditation on that, maybe 1 or 2 more sessions on that. That's fine. But on the date, when you're actually talking to her, or even in a relationship later on, you can allow yourself to dip into that. But you don't want to have a full outburst of that negativity. You want to allow yourself to feel it, but not let it take you over. And this is where dating overlaps with personal development and spirituality. Because Eckhart Tolle, for example, or various other meditation teachers, they tell you that if you want to meditate effectively, it is very important that you allow yourself to feel, a little bit over here, careful with the people, that you allow yourself to feel the emotions without letting the emotion take over your thinking. So when you go into vulnerability, talk about it in a funny way, in an entertaining way. And when you actually do dip into the fear and the anxiety, be there a little bit, share it. And then it's really important that when you have that depth, that DMC moment of the date, that deep and meaningful conversation moment, that you then, boom, pivot out of it. And remember that the first couple of weeks of dating have to just be fun and positive all the time. You don't want it either if a girl comes and she unloads all her trauma onto you. And we all have a certain amount of that. We've all had a certain amount of hardship that we had to overcome as men, absolutely. But you don't want to burden her with that. You can absolutely share your daily struggles. For example, let's say you go on a date and she asks you, how was your day? And you can say, you don't just have to blindly lie and say everything was amazing. You should largely 80-90% of your communication center around the positivity of it. The great things that happened to you that day, the things you're grateful for, the things you've got planned, positive things. But you can't say, well, it was stressful, this guy pissed me off, blah, blah, blah. You can share certain things. But one, the energy you say it with really, really matters. And at the same time, the timing matters. You can tell a woman about all of your trauma. It's just a matter of when. Same with dirty talk. When you're in bed, you may be calling each other things that you would never call each other on a first date. Or at least while you're sitting at the restaurant. There is a timing component that matters. 6 months, 12 months down the line, you can share all these things. But the most important thing is that when you share these things, you have to share them in a way where you don't make yourself look like a victim, and you never expect her to solve the issue for you. That's very important. You can ask for input, you can ask for advice, of course. She will most likely have really important ideas to share with you. Same with Fernanda. Fernanda's got a master's degree from one of the best universities in Brazil. She's extraordinarily smart. Whenever something's going on, I ask for her input because she usually provides a perspective that I didn't consider beforehand. That's why you can absolutely ask for advice, but she has to realize above everything that you will take care of the situation, that you will handle it. Vicious animals, very, very vicious animals. They look like your friend. It's actually funny. When I grew up in Germany, my father used to read a book to me called The Seagull Jonathan, which is hilarious because one of my best friends was also a coach in our coaching program. His name's also Jonathan. So there was a book called The Seagull Jonathan, and it describes these amazing adventures the seagull would go on. Fly through the sky, do maneuvers. He was the rebellious one of the tribe. But then, so up until I came to Ireland, I thought these were beautiful creatures. But then I realized they're actually mean and vicious. And they will do whatever they can to take whatever food you have on you from you. You might be walking down Grafton Street, a very particular busy shopping street, and they will just go for it. They'll snatch it out of your hand. They might take a right on your head right after taking the food from you. Anyway, beside the point. When you share your vulnerable moments, do so in a way where you don't expect a solution from her. The energy you bring to the day, it has to be positive, has to be fun, has to be lighthearted. And it comes back to affirming your own sense of certainty as a man. That's probably one of the most important lessons. Because what most men do is when they're vulnerable, they want her to solve it. They bring the victimhood. They either don't share anything at all, or they make themselves look like a victim. And yes, you are supposed to share, because if you don't share at all, well, then you miss out on true, genuine moments of connection. For example, I had a friend of mine who struggled a little bit with a little bit of his mental health through the pandemic. And then he went on a date with a girl, with a lady, and he told her about that. Now, over the course of 60 minutes, him sharing that probably only made up 5 to 7 minutes of the entire date, is my guess. I wasn't there, but since I know him extremely well, I would assume that's the amount that took up. But he did share that, and they did connect afterwards. And they went home together that night, and they spent a fantastic evening together. So vulnerability is not a tool, is not a tactic that you use to create fake connection. This is not pickup artist nonsense. This is about authenticity and vulnerability. You absolutely want to share those things. You want to feel free to share them. The most important thing you got to ask yourself is, if you have an overly strong desire to share negative things with her, why is that there in the first place? Why isn't your natural inclination to share something positive? Most likely because you haven't taken care of your mental and emotional state. That's very important. Absolutely, you can and you should share. But when you share things with her, share them in a way that you're giving her insight into the things that happened to you in your past for her to get to know you, or the things that you've overcome, almost with a degree of pride, so she can get to know you. But it's not you embodying the victim or you being negative. Because you know people who can talk. Comedians are the best example. And you don't have to be a comedian, pardon me, you don't have to be extraordinarily funny to be with women. Absolutely, you don't have to do that. But comedians process a lot of their trauma in very funny ways. They tell a lot of heavy stories in a really funny way. And they're being vulnerable, but the energy they say it with is fun, is lighthearted, and entertaining. Now, if you want me to help you with that personally, if you want to learn how to find the right girlfriend, life partner, or wife, then simply click the link underneath this video, wherever this is going to be posted, and apply for a free initial consultation call. During that call, we're going to take a look at your individual situation. We're going to map out a plan. We're going to figure out what are your individual blind spots. Because there are things you're currently doing very well with women. You have unconscious competencies. things you're doing well that you don't even know you're doing well. Then there are things you know you're doing well with women. Then there's things you know you suck at. And there's things you don't know that you don't even know. And in life, you can only ever have one of two things. You can have the result, or you can have blind spots. And if you don't have the result, in other words, an amazing relationship, an amazing woman by your side, well, then you have blind spots. If you want my help resolving them, apply for a free initial consultation call. Looking forward to speaking with you soon. Take care.